Hi, it's Tash. Welcome to Tash's Library. Today's video is going to be looking at the books I read in August and what I thought about them. Now, I did finish my TBR and managed to slip in a few other books as well. And overall, I read 14 books. 11 of those were physical copies and 3 were ebooks on my Kindle. I read 7 fantasies, 4 science fiction, 1 magical realism, 1 nonfiction, and 1 mystery. Now, I started the month really well, and I read a book immediately that was not on my TBR. So that was interesting. But I was intrigued by A Resistance of Witches by Morgan Ryan. This is an historical fantasy in which you have a society of witches in London during the Second World War who decide to offer their services to Winston Churchill to help win the war for Britain. We mainly follow Lydia Polk, who is the main protagonist, and she is a witch who ends up going to France to locate dangerous artifacts. This was a super cool premise, has really exciting action scenes, fascinating magic, and I really adored the supporting characters. There's a great Haitian American art curator. There's also a young woman who is part of the French Resistance. They are really interesting to learn about, and you have a few POV chapters from their perspectives, and they're just fascinating. They were probably even more interesting than the main character. The book explores themes of good versus evil and family and sacrifice. Great debut novel, like really great, really solid and masterfully written debut novel. Initially, it read a little YA for me, and I wanted a little bit more world building. So, for example, I wanted a bit more about the Academy of Witches in London. I wanted a little bit more about the occult. Also, some of the scenes involving Nazis were a little bit stereotypical, kind of reminiscent of Indiana Jones. But ultimately, if you love historical fantasy and love reading books about magic, pick this one up. It's really fun. And if you are doing our fantasy bingo, then this would fulfill hard mode for published in 2025. Then, for a cover with an author photo, I read The Bullet That Missed by Richard Osman, which is the 3rd book in the Thursday Murder Club. And basically the Thursday Murder Club is comprised of 4 pensioners who live in a village called Cooper's Chase, a pensioners village, and they decide to have a club where they solve cold murders, and they are just such charming characters, and the murders are just interesting because it's kind of cozy, but it's also a bit too dark for cozy. There are quite deep things explored in these, so it kind of skirts the line. In this one, there's an investigation of a young journalist. Very snappy read with short chapters. It was really well plotted and had some cool twists in it. And as I said, it's got a really good dose of humor because it is cozy, but it's also got really poignant moments and some occasional threats as well. We get the return of some loved old characters. We also have an introduction to new characters and the exploration of themes of friendship and love in its multiple forms. I didn't enjoy this as much as the first 2 books. I felt like it had a bit of a lull in the middle, but it was still a very solid 4 stars for me, and I would recommend this to anyone who's wanting to read a cozy mystery with some stakes. Then for hyped book, I read The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. And I was a little bit nervous about this one because there are such mixed reviews on it. But it's set in an alternate Europe where the Catholic Church is largely female run, and we have a ragtag team composed of various monsters, so vampires, elves, magicians, mercenaries, and they come together to escort a young woman who is believed to be the heir to the throne of Troy, and they have to escort her across Europe safely. I loved this book. I really enjoyed the writing. I love the subverted Europe with this female-dominated church. The magic was really cool. The plot was intriguing with nice twisty action scenes, many last stands. The characters are gritty and morally grey, as you would expect from Abercrombie, from what I understand. I haven't read any other books by him. And there's a lot of violence. This is a very violent, gory book with a lot of crude language, but I didn't feel that was gratuitous. It really fits the story, and Abercrombie never really stepped over that line, in my opinion. There's a really good mix of humor and pathos, and it explores themes of redemption and found family and the fluidity of good versus evil, and how these can look very different depending on your perspective and life experiences. I cannot wait for more for this book. I really can't. And probably the only thing that let me down a little bit is I wanted the vampire's backstory. So anyone who's looking for a quest fantasy with morally great characters, I think you'd enjoy this. Now, I'm not sure it's because I haven't read the Blade itself and its sequels, so maybe I went into this without any expectations for Joe Abercrombie, but I really enjoyed it. If you're doing bingo, this would fulfill hard mode for Knights and Paladins, not hard mode for published in 2025, definitely hard mode for elves and dwarves. There is an elf POV character in this, and also it's a book in parts, and that would fulfill hard mode as well. Then I had a bit of a shift, and I read The Voyage of the Basilisk by Marie Brennan, which is the third book in the Memoirs of Lady Trent series. And this was for the prompt, a book with a favourite trope. It also fulfilled the buzzword of on cover prompt, which was transport on the cover. And we basically follow Isabella, who is a person really interested in studying dragons, who becomes an expert in the study of dragons. And in this one, she is going on a ship voyage with various people. And I'm not going to tell you who they are because it will give spoilers for the first two books. But it's ultimately a little travelogue because it is written in the form of memoirs. It's got archaeology and history and natural history and politics and anthropology. Really interesting. It's my favorite of the series so far as well. I really enjoyed this. I felt that the books have improved as I've got to them. There's a really cool new character in this one as well, which I really enjoyed. This also had more dragons, a more dragon scholarship happening, great atmospheric settings, lovable characters, and what I like most about the series is the real quagmire of global and local politics. I really enjoy that. Isabella is a very independent, practical, feisty character, and the book explores themes of identity, the pursuit of knowledge, gender barriers, and cultural differences. I'd really recommend this to lovers of fantasy with a Victorian feel and/or dragons. If you're doing bingo, this would fulfill hard mode for epistolary book, also hard mode for parents, but only this third book, and hard mode for book in parts. Then, for conjunction in the title, I read a quirky little book called Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove. Now, this story begins with a ship AI, Demeter, finding that their passengers are all dead at the end of a long voyage. And of course, blame is placed on the ship AI. How could you let this happen? Demeter then is intrigued and starts to investigate along with the assistance of the medical AI called Stewart. And there are supernatural threats on the horizon here. There are beings loose on this ship. This is so weird. I can only explain this as cozy science fiction meets Lovecraft. if you get that vibe. It initially feels quite episodic, but it comes together so masterfully at the end. And as I said, it's mostly from the AI perspectives, but there are also occasional chapters that are interludes from the perspective of other really cool characters in this. There's an interesting integration of classic horror characters. So you have Frankenstein and Dracula, werewolves, a mummy, and it's just such an addictive read. I just absolutely loved it. And it explores great themes of logic versus emotion, found family, the role of memory, and belonging. So yes, as I said, it was just at the beginning, I was a little uncertain about it. It felt fragmented. So if you're finding this, push through, because it does really come together. I absolutely adored this book. I gave it 5 stars in the end, and I'd highly recommend it to those who enjoy weird fiction or looking for a light-hearted science fiction book. If you're doing bingo, this will fulfill hard mode for book in parts. Also published in 2025, but not hard mode. And it's also small press or self-published hard mode. Then, in order to accrue a Goodreads Challenge bookmark, I delved into Beth Revis's Full Speed to a Crash Landing. Now, I had heard good things about this, so I thought, like, I'll give it a go. And it follows a character called Ada Lamar, who is rescued by a government salvage ship when her spaceship's hull kind of has a hole in it and she is losing oxygen and life support. Now, on this government ship is a government agent who is on a classified mission, so he's trying to keep it all hush-hush. However, they quickly come to realize that Ada's has skills that they might find quite useful. I really enjoyed that this character was named after Ada Lovelace and Hedy Lamarr. I thought that was a really nice touch. The space setting was really interesting, and it sort of delved into a little bit of science, although I felt it was very light on the science. So this is not very, very soft sci-fi for sure. The plot idea was intriguing. It's sort of like a heisty book, and it does explore themes of greed and trust and environmental despair. However, I didn't love this. It's described as a sort of sexy space heist, but the chemistry between the two characters was completely lacking. I also felt that the heist component wasn't particularly well done. The main character is incredibly annoying. All she does is obsess about food, really. The humor didn't work for me. I didn't find her funny. Every time she was flirting, it just came across as quite obnoxious. And the other characters were very sort of cardboardy flat. So look, if you're looking for an easy to read science fiction romance that has a very slow burn, light on the romance, particularly the first one, I believe it kind of escalates a little bit in the subsequent books, then look, give it a go, because I don't think this book was for me. Romance in science fiction is really something that doesn't work for me. And once again, the humor didn't work for me. If the humor works for you, then I think you'd quite enjoy this. Then for titled chapters, I read The Island of Dr Moreau by H.G. Wells. This follows Edward, who is shipwrecked and is given refuge on this very strange island that only has a few inhabitants. So you have Dr. Moreau, who's a vivisectionist exiled from Britain, his assistant Montgomery, and some oddly proportioned servants. Now, Edward quickly comes to realize that Moreau is potentially engaging in highly unethical experiments, and he starts fearing for his safety. So this is a science fiction book with quite a lot of horror elements. It's an atmospheric Gothic tale, and it is genuinely creepy. Very engaging story, and explores themes of ethics, the suppression of animal instincts, the nature of civilization, and the use of religion as a control mechanism. Now, note that it does have very disturbing scenes with animal cruelty. So if that's not your thing, don't go there. And it can be seen as a little bit dated in its conceptions of society, particularly with regard to gender and class structures. but for its time, it's a very intriguing read. And I would really recommend this to any lovers of gothic horror / science fiction. And if you're doing bingo, it would fulfill hard mode for biopunk. Then for a cover depicting an isolated or rural setting, I read The Enchanted Greenhouse, which is the sequel to The Spell Shop by Sarah Beth Durst. This is a very loose sequel to The Spell Shop, but I really recommend reading The Spell Shop first, because this one does have spoilers for the ending of The Spell Shop. So just be aware of that. And in this one, we follow librarian Turlu Perna, who is turned into a statue as punishment for using illegal magic to create a sentient spider plant. The sentient spider plant that features in The Spell Shop. She awakens on this island then that's inhabited only by a gardener called Yarrow, who is a bit of a grumpy man, but rightly so, because he is responsible for maintaining hundreds of greenhouses single-handedly. This is a very cozy fantasy with that sort of grumpy sunshine trope in it. This is beautifully written, just like The Spell Shop. It's got very lovable human and non-human characters. Sentient plants appear. Yes, we have a sentient rose called Lottie, who is a very charming character. And then we have a couple other plants as well, which I won't tell you about because it's fun to discover them as you go. A very good mix of coziness, humor, and some threat as well. And the setting is just gorgeous. You've got all these greenhouses that are magically controlled so that they can have completely different climates and different really weird plants. I thought that was just really original and interesting. This is a very subtle slow burn romance. There is no spice, which is great because I don't like spice in romance. Very intriguing and addictive story. And I read this in one day. It's like 400 pages. And I sat down and read it all in one day. That tells you how much I loved it. It explores the themes of loneliness, belonging, finding one's purpose in life, and particularly hope. Just so gorgeous, heartwarming, true balm for the soul. I'd so recommend this to lovers of cozy fantasy that wanted just a touch of romance, and those in need of a pick-me-up. Like if you're not feeling great, this is the ideal book to read. And if you're doing bingo, it fulfills not hard mode for cozy SFF, not hard mode as well for published in 2025, but does fulfill hard mode for Stranger in a Strange Land. Then I went to a non-fiction book for adjective in the title, and I read A Dumb Bird's Field Guide to the Worst Birds Ever by Matt Kraft. And oh my gosh, he's back. I love this series. He pretty much just disparages birds. I know it sounds terrible, but it's great. He uses this really unique and hilarious rating system, fabulously insulting descriptions. He does use a lot of bad language. Just note that if that's not your thing. Also, if you are a true bird lover who doesn't enjoy reading anyone disparaging birds, even for humor's sake, then stay away from this because you will be offended. I just loved it so much. He manages to make you learn about birds while still making you laugh. He's got this great page where he characterizes bird shapes, and that was just hilarious. I really enjoyed that one. And he's got a great haiku about woodpeckers. He particularly hates woodpeckers, so check that one out. Then for the bookworm game prompt, typical for Japan, I read a book that's translated from the Japanese, which makes sense, and it was Tales from the Cafe, Before the Coffee Gets Cold. So this is the second book in that particular series by Kawaguchi. This is set in this cafe, funicular, owned by Nagare, and in this cafe you can actually travel in time, either to the past or the future, but it's got very, very strict rules. So you have to sit in a particular spot, you have to go to a time to meet someone who had been in the cafe or is planning to be in the cafe, and you must return before the coffee gets cold. You also cannot change anything. This one covers 4 stories. So we have The Best Friend, who is about a man who raises his best friend's daughter. Then we have a story about a mother and son. So this son who has regret that he missed his mother's funeral. We also follow the lovers, where we have a man who travels to the future to see his past girlfriend. And then we have the married couple, where a middle-aged detective wants to give his wife a gift. This has such deep, sad topics that are portrayed in such a heartwarming and life-affirming way. It has great links between the characters. In this one, we have some old regulars, but we also have some new characters that we come to know, and we find out more about the backstory of some of the characters that we've met in the first book. It's got a very theatrical feel, so just be aware of that, because it is based on a Japanese play, so you really get a sense of that, enter stage, exit stage feel. But ultimately, this book just explores grief, regret, love, and hope in the most beautiful way. I would so recommend this to any lovers of magical realism and heartfelt stories. Then for a book with an animal companion, I read Miss Percy's Pocket Guide to the Care and Feeding of British Dragons by Quentin Olson, and this is the first book in the series. This is pretty much a Jane Austen with dragons, and we follow Mildred, a spinster who is living with her sister and her sister's family. She's largely working as a governess for her sister's children and is seen as a little bit of an inconvenience. But when an uncle dies, she has left an inheritance that includes various odds and ends, including a dragon egg. And she seeks the assistance of the local vicar to categorize, identify, catalog the various objects that she receives. The vicar is such a great character. He's my favorite. Like, he's so good. And it's really nice to see their blossoming friendship through this book. The book is also really funny in places. And it's cozy, yet has some stakes. And Mildred is a very likable and believable character. Now, note that the writing does feel a bit rough in this. And initially I found it a little bit slow and I was uncertain what I felt about it, but I'm so glad I persevered because it's just such a heartwarming little story. Also, I found that it overuses parentheses and long sentences. So every single page has at least one set of parentheses, and these could have been shorter sentences. But other than that, I just think it's really worth your while, and I'd really recommend it to lovers of cozy fantasy with a Jane Austen vibe. And if you're doing bingo, this would fulfill hard mode for self-published and cozy SFF as well. Then for a debut book and for the Buzzwordathon title prompt with, I read The Girl with Ghost Eyes by M.H. Borison, which is the first book in the Daoshi Chronicles. Now this follows Li Lin, who's the daughter of a respected Daoshi exorcist in Chinatown in San Francisco in the 19th century. Now, Li Lin has yin eyes, which means that she can see the supernatural, she can see ghosts, she can see the underworld. And whilst this seems like a kind of cool yet a little bit terrifying gift, this is very shameful in her father's eyes, because there should not be any delving into the underworld and its monsters. This book has a really intriguing magic, really cool supernatural beings. The setting is really cool, and it really explores that immigrant experience. And it explores themes of family and social structures and prejudice and tradition versus modernity. The issue I had with it is it sounds a little too academic at times. This constant integration of culture, it's just like every paragraph had to sort of teach you something, and it felt a little bit forced. as though it just didn't take a natural course in telling you the story. And there's also a lot of haphazard incidents and character interactions that feel a little stitched together with no clear purpose. The dialogue didn't seem realistic. Once again, it seemed a vehicle for teaching you about Chinese culture. And I really dislike Li Lin's father as well, but I think you probably meant to, so that's okay. But I found that this book had every element that I should love. I really enjoy that sort of cultural experience, but I just didn't find it enjoyable to read. So I'd really only recommend this to people who love books of lots of folklore and culture. Like, I think for that it is quite interesting and it is worth your while. And the plot is interesting ultimately. Then I went on to Mickey 7 by Edward Ashton, and this was for the no A and off the or and in the title. And Mickey 7 is an expendable. He is part of a mission to colonize an exoplanet. And part of being an expendable means that he is given all the really dangerous jobs with the understanding that if he dies, one of his clones will be woken up and to replace him. However, after a particularly dangerous mission, he is left for dead and somehow manages to get back to camp, only to find that Mickey 8 is now occupying his room. This was quite funny, and the whole premise of using expendables and two expendables coming together, who are the same person effectively, was interesting. And it has cool world building. So the exoplanet Niflheim, cool naming by the way, was cool, although I feel like it could have expanded a little bit further. But ultimately, this was just an okay read. It was very shallow, very weak plot. I felt that centered purely on ensuring that nobody found out that two Mickeys were alive at the same time. And I felt that it was a real lost opportunity for exploring a really cool premise. So look, if you're looking for a light-hearted science fiction book, light on the science, you may enjoy this. I found it okay. I gave it 3 stars, but it's definitely not a favorite. And then I read another book called The Society of Unknowable Objects by Gareth Brown. This is a new release, which I really had to get to because Gareth Brown's The Book of Doors was one of my favorite books of last year, and I really wanted to see what he did with this one. So this follows Magda, who is a member of a Society of Unknowable Objects in London. And there's only 4 members of this society, but they are dedicated to making sure that magical items do not fall into the wrong hands. They get news that there is a particular magical item that has been located in Hong Kong, and so she travels off to Hong Kong to investigate. Things get crazy then, and it turns out that there are other people interested in these magical items, and then there is indeed great peril. Overall, there is a bit of travel across countries in this book, which is pretty cool. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. The characterization is brilliant. All the characters read as very unique personalities. Very cool magic, as expected, because the Book of Doors also had really awesome magic in it. And Gareth Brown is so skilled at creating these truly menacing villains. And he does this in this again. It's villains where you're like, oh, you're very cringy almost, like, because you're like, oh, I'm actually really scared for my main characters here. Very engaging plot, very high stakes, exciting action scenes, exploration of the themes of power and responsibility, consequences, ethics, and duty. It's not quite as intricate and thought-provoking as the Book of Doors, but still a really solid, highly recommended read. If you are looking for a contemporary urban fantasy with reluctant heroes, this could be the book for you. And if you're doing bingo, it fulfills hard mode for book in parts, and is published in 2025, but clearly non-hard mode. And then finally, I read my 3 short stories from the big book of science Fiction, which is edited by Anne and Jeff Vandermeer. The first one was sort of a reread because it's one of the stories from The Martian Chronicles by Ray Bradbury, and this one is titled September 2005, and it follows an elderly couple who are living on Mars and have a strange son who seems to shapeshift. I gave this 5 stars for ideas, super good ideas, and enjoyment was 5 as well. I love Ray Bradbury's short stories. It's truly brilliant, so I really enjoyed that. Then I read Kim Stanley Robinson's Before I Wake, and in this, an unusual sort of cosmic event blurs the lines between wakefulness and dreaming. So people are uncertain when they're awake or not, and you got a team of scientists trying to figure it out. The ideas were really good, so I thought that was probably like a 4 for ideas, but I didn't love reading this. It was about a 3 for enjoyment. And finally, I read The Ghost Standard by William Tenn. And in this one, this was weird. So you have a human and a sentient lobster-like creature on this escape pod from a spaceship, and they are playing a game for their survival called The Ghost Standard. This was a bit weird. The ideas were about a 3. Enjoyment was about a 3. I didn't love it, but it was cool. But it was just an average mid story. And that's that. That is my very, very long wrap-up. So thank you for watching this far, if you are indeed still watching. My favorite book of the month was The Devils. Let me know what your favorite book was. And until I see you next time, take care.